BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, it's all about the harvest. From grain to veg, we join farmers around the country as they bring in the crops.
It's absolutely chaotic and it's very long nights, but we all pull together and I just absolutely love it.
It is a bit of a mixed picture, with some farmers doing well.
You take one off the plant, you see the cop's surprisingly big, even though the plant is quite short.
And others struggling with the effects of the prolonged dry weather.
A pea pod has probably got 8-9 peas in a pod. These have got 4 and 5. Our yields at the end here are devastating.
Well, this has been a tricky year for many farmers, as drought and rainstorms have had an impact at various times, usually the wrong times. So today we'll see how Harvest 2025 is shaping up. Let's start in East Anglia, which is perhaps the arable capital of the country, crops like wheat, barley and oats. After a very dry spring and a dry, hot early summer, the fear was that we'd be seeing a big loss in yield with fewer heads of grain, and that the grains themselves would be very small because of the lack of moisture. But it seems some cereals have managed to perform better than expected, thanks to a small amount of summer rainfall. Back in July, at the start of harvest, which was earlier than usual for many, Anna Hill went out to watch some of the first malting barley being delivered to Dewing Grain in Norfolk, which runs the grain storage facility for Aylsham Grain Farmers Cooperative. Andrew Dewing told her how the crop was looking as it came off the trailer.
The barley that's coming in is winter malting barley, and I just had a look at it, and it's got the problem of this summer, which is awns and broken grains. It's been very hard to thrash out.
What's an awn?
It's the little hairy bit that sticks on the top of the grain, and the combine is supposed to break that off. The grains kind of rushed through to ripeness, went through the growth stages through that drought. It's finished brilliantly. There's been perfect rain and grain fill, but the actual fitness has come in a heat wave, so it isn't really traditionally fit. The drum in the combine can't rub the awns off, and if they pressure it too much, you break the grains in half, and then they're not viable as malting barley. So it's a problem that has been very, very prevalent this year.
This year has been particularly difficult.
It's the spring barley that got planted early in February because that drought had really started then, and the land was ready, and then it just didn't rain. And that affected every crop differently. We've been calling the winter barley crop a disaster, but it in fact wasn't or hasn't been because of the rain in May, the very end of May, and the pure UV from the sun, and then another rain 2 weeks later, and then the finish sunshine has given us a decent quality of grain, or albeit with the odd broken grain, but largely it's big, it's bold, and it's a reasonable spec.
Andrew and I have just come into a field full of barley. You can hear it swishing away. You're not a farmer, Andrew. You're a grain merchant, so you're looking at this with a merchant's eyes, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm supposed to say there's something wrong with it now, aren't I?
How does a price then come along in a year like this?
Well, it's a tough question. The prices are down. We can import quite easily from other countries. There's no hesitation for the government to allow that. So here we sit with a very poor price and then a bigger yield. Inevitably, that should mean prices come under even more pressure. However, I think the whole world is at a low ebb in terms of price, and we're just itching for one little problem to appear. There's hints of it. There's the Russian crop isn't as big as they declared. The Chinese crop isn't as big as they declared, probably. So there's a few things that makes the whole world complex go up, which will probably take us with it.
Grain trader Andrew Dewing there. We perhaps don't think of grass as a crop in the same way as barley, but for livestock farmers it is the food they grow for their animals. And the hot, dry weather has had a big impact on grass growth in some areas, in that there hasn't been any. As Dave Harvey, BBC Points West environment correspondent, reports from the southwest of England.
Breakfast time for Sarah Godwin's cows in her dry Wiltshire fields. A tractor is pulling racks of feed along, and the cows can hardly wait, jostling to get first munch.
Just bringing what they'd normally eat in the winter, bringing it out to them in the fields to eat in the summer because there's no grass.
They run along with the tractor, and then when it stops, all I can see is a huge crowd of cattle. Somewhere in the middle, a rack of nutritious feed, saved for the winter but vital to keep these cows healthy now. Sarah and her farm team have never done this before. It's never been this dry for so long.
Is there much for them in this field?
No, it's nothing at all. The grass is completely dried up. There's no goodness in it. It's just completely stalky with no nutritional value.
And have you ever had to do this before?
Never, no. We've never known a season like this. Never known the heat, the dry, the lack of rain, and for such a prolonged period as well.
Although we're now in the heat of summer, the damage was actually done months ago. To see exactly what's happening, I went to a test field, a grass meadow grown at Cirencester's Royal Agricultural University, scrutinised by Professor Nikki Cannon.
When the grass is cut, you can see there's very little green material above it, and there's very little leaf on these plants. Most of it has really shriveled up. And it's really the leaf that contains the sugar, which is the tasty bit and the energy for the cattle to eat.
Ironically, some plants are doing well. Nikki shows me a dock, its leaves fat and green, long roots finding deep water. Pink and yellow wildflowers are pretty healthy too. But in a grazing pasture, all these are weeds, and the grass has been ruined by the long, dry spring.
We've had 50% of the expected spring rainfall. They say that spring is the season that is the fastest warming out of the 4 seasons of the year, and that's really the important time for plant growth.
So climate change is really here?
Climate change is really here, yes.
The seasons are completely muddled. We're getting extreme weather, heavy downpours, drought periods. It's really difficult to manage.
Until we get rain and lots of it, dairy farmers like Sarah will be feeding their cattle on expensive winter feed. And what they'll do when actual winter comes, well, that's probably for another day.
Dave Harvey reporting. The drought has hit crops across the country, and this year the pea harvest has been breaking records for all the wrong reasons, with very low yields. Peas are one of the UK's favourite vegetables, and one which we're normally almost self-sufficient in. But this year's small crop might mean we're looking to other countries for supplies. Nina Pullman went to meet Stephen Francis, Managing Director of pea cooperative Fen Peas in Lincolnshire, just as the final field was being harvested. He told her how the weather has devastated this crop.
Welcome to the final field of the 2025 pea harvest for Fen Peas Limited. We are a producer organisation producing hopefully 10,000 tonnes of peas, but it will not be happening this year because of the weather we have had. From really South Lincolnshire up into the lower Wolds, which is where we are now. Beautiful scenery behind you. We can actually see Lincoln Cathedral.
So we can see a pea viner in front of us that's harvesting peas. Just talk me through what's happening.
It's always difficult to describe, but what I say is the pod has got a weak point, like a banana does or whatever as well. If you were to get a pea pod and throw it at a brick wall as hard as you can, it would split at the weak pod and the peas just fall down. And that really is what happens in the machine. It is very clever, and then once the peas have come out of the pod, gravity lets them drop down through the screens onto a long pea conveyor, which is the whole length of the machine. You can see in the window behind you a tank that's filling up with peas, similar to people seeing a combine. Our aim is to harvest and freeze the peas within 150 minutes.
So we can see some pea crops on the ground of this field. Are they what you would expect at this point? Are you happy with the crop?
No, at this point I'd expect them to be much thicker. If you think a pea pod has probably got 8-9 peas in a pod, these have got 4 and 5, and when you think about that in percentage terms, that is one hell of a difference. And so our yields at the end here are, I'm going to say devastating. I was going to use disappointing, but they're more than devastating. We literally fell off a cliff 2 weeks ago, and our final 20%, 25% have been bitterly disappointing.
You had a good start to the season, but I can see it's not been an easy last few weeks.
No, not been easy, but we've still got smiles on our faces. We're already thinking about 2026, where's the varieties coming from. PGRO, our research organisation, They've got all their trials in, they will start disseminating the results from that. We are only evident for 8-9 weeks of the year, but it is most definitely a 12-month cycle.
Stephen Francis. Well, on the other side of Lincolnshire, Tim Lamyman has been celebrating breaking the world record with his oilseed rape harvest, with a yield of 7.52 tonnes a hectare. It does seem to have been a good year for the crop, but to put this in context, the new world record is nearly 3 times last year's UK national average yield. Mr Lamyman isn't new at breaking records. In previous years, he set world records for yields in winter wheat and barley. Let's look at fruit now, and again, a bit of a mixed picture. Soft fruit growers have been delighted at the quality and yield of this year's crop, but for cherries, well, it's a more nuanced picture. The cherry harvest for this year is almost done. Well, in the past, it might have continued for another month. And one of the country's largest growers, based in Herefordshire, says warmer winters and summers are shortening the growing season. Bob Huckenhull has been finding out what impact this year's hot weather's been having.
At Lower Hope Farm near Penkham in Herefordshire, workers are busy picking this year's crop of cherries. The cherry trees are under 600 polytunnels to protect them from the rain. Not that that has been much of a problem this season. So with me now is the farm manager, Coco Kolev. How has the season been this year, Coco, as far as cherries are concerned?
We're experiencing quite a challenging season this year due to the hot weather. The cherry season seems to be shrinking now. In the last week of July we are picking the latest varieties. In the past we would be looking to pick those same varieties at the end of August, beginning of September.
Once the cherries are picked, they're taken to the pack house on the farm. The cherries are put into fridges, then graded by size and colour, ready for transporting to supermarkets. 60 punnets are packed every minute.
We've got quite a good crop this year, plenty of cherries on the tree. Again, due to the hot weather, the June drop, this is where the tree decides how much fruit to keep on the tree. Basically, because of the heat, the June drop basically stopped, and the tree is left with more fruit, which is one of the reasons why you've got like smaller size. And then the other reason is because of the heat. Basically, that's stressing the trees, and then the fruit stops sizing basically.
So basically they're a bit smaller than what you would normally like for the supermarkets. What are the implications of that?
British supermarkets, they like big cherries, over like 30 mil ideally, and anything basically over 24 mil it's sellable. But again, due to the hot weather, obviously the size is down by 2-3 millimeters.
Does it mean you'll get less money basically?
Pretty much, yeah. Unfortunately, I think we can't go to get the king cherries are obviously the most valuable ones, which we can't quite produce this year.
Overall, would you describe this as a good season? How will it compare, say, with last year?
We're expecting quite a high tonnage. Probably we're gonna be near like 600 tons, which is more than what we thought we were gonna have this year. Cherries are unpredictable, unfortunately. We can't tell what's gonna happen. Every year is different.
Coco Kolev there in Herefordshire. So, small but tasty cherries, a bad pea harvest and a reasonably good oilseed rape one show just how variable harvest can be. This year's is turning out also to be a bit what farmers call catchy, in that they're having to catch the good bits of weather in between the rain to get it in. Overall then, how's it going? I spoke to Olivia Bonser, Senior Cereals Analyst at the industry body, the AHDB.
So it's quite variable at the moment. We're, nearing completion with winter barley, just a bit left in sort of Scotland, Northern Ireland. Still obviously then got sort of the spring crops to really get into, but generally it's quite variable because of the weather conditions.
There were some dire warnings about both yield and quality for cereal crops this year. How is it working out? How is yield looking?
So again, it's quite variable. It's very much dependent on whereabouts in the country you are, but also to do with soil types. So we've seen, for example, the crops on the much lighter soils faring a bit worse off, basically, because they've not been able to retain any sort of moisture throughout the growing season. But then on the sort of heavier soils, it's probably fared a bit better. For winter wheat, for example, yields are generally averaging below the 5-year average. However, winter OSR, for example, is quite a bit above average.
And generally speaking, what's the quality like?
Yeah, so it's a bit early on the wheat side of things, but it's a bit of a concern at the moment with these showers that we're having. So if you have really wet weather before you cut the crop, and you can have issues with Hagberg especially.
And Hagberg is the all-important measure of how much protein is going to be in that wheat, which will decide how much it's worth, because whether it can go for baking or whether it ends up as feed for animals.
Yeah, and if it doesn't meet that Hagberg requirement, the farmers can't get the premium for it.
So what about the quality on other things then?
For winter barley, for example, quality is quite good. We have a lot of spring malting barley. So it's a little bit early on the quality side, but I wouldn't say major concern at the moment. It's just a case of watching the weather over the next couple of weeks and the impact that could have.
And it does always come back to the weather, doesn't it?
No, exactly. As well as the quality side of things that could be hindered by that wetter weather. If you're combining the grain and the moisture's too high, the farmers can't sell it if the moisture's above a certain level. So they'll have to put it through a grain dryer, and that obviously incurs extra costs for the farmer as well.
Could be good news, though, for livestock farmers trying to grow grass.
Yeah, definitely. It's been quite a mixed picture, depending on whether you're a livestock farmer or an arable farmer. This rain's quite welcome, probably, if you're a livestock farmer, because of the struggle that they've had not having enough forage. But hopefully this rain that we're seeing at the moment is mitigating it a bit.
Is there anything farmers can do to mitigate against all these variables? Or is it really a case of just taking a deep breath and praying to the weather gods?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think there's a few different ideas that people are trying, whether that's sort of differing varieties. So varieties are always being developed to try and sort of adapt to those more extreme weather conditions. And also trying to drill at different periods, looking at different cultivation methods. It's quite difficult at the end of the day, because essentially the crop needs certain conditions to grow no matter what you do. And so to an extent, we're still very much guided by those weather conditions.
Olivia Bonser at the AHDB. Well, the highs and lows of harvest took over BBC Local Radio in England this week. Farm Watch covered a day in the life of farming on Thursday, and you can still catch up with it if you search for it on BBC Sounds. This all began last year when it ran alongside the Farmer's Guardian campaign Farm 24, which also took place this week. This year's Farm Watch was bigger. Everything was in there, from Combine Cam, a live camera in a combine harvester in Wiltshire, which proved strangely transfixing, to chats with farmers around the country. One of its presenters was Wiltshire farmer and bake-off contestant Mike Greenwood-Wilkins. He should have been in the middle of harvest at home, but escaped to join what he told me before the event aimed to be a celebration of farming.
So I really, really hope that it is a bit of a breath of fresh air in reporting around agriculture, in that it's a real positive insight into what farmers do, because actually farmers have so many struggles and so many difficulties that we face on a daily basis, economical problems, as well as the weather and the environment and policy issues and so on. And it's quite easy for farmers to complain about that a lot. And the nature of news is that it's always negative stories that get reported. But actually, farmers up and down the country every single day of the year get up every single day. They go out on their farm. They produce great, amazing British food. They look after our countryside, and they absolutely love what they do. And I don't think we actually have enough of a conversation around all of the positive, great things that farmers do every single day, and why farmers love being farmers and why they're passionate about carrying on in this industry. And I really hope that Farm Watch shines a light on those stories of all the great things that farmers do.
They have asked you at probably one of your busiest times of the year, harvest, a very intense time of the year, but also it can be a fun time of the year, I guess.
Oh, such a fun time of year. I love harvest so much. It is especially because at home it's an absolute family affair and it's absolutely chaotic and it's very long nights, but we all pull together and the energy is really high paced and it all feels slightly stressful but still really good fun, and I just absolutely love it. Getting sort of slightly cross looks from Dad at the moment because we are harvesting at home and I'm off now to do everything for Farm Watch and the combine's rolling and he wants me to be at home, so I do feel quite guilty, but hopefully it's worth it for the positive messaging that we're getting across. I'll be home soon, Dad, I promise.
Have you at least left him a cake?
No, I haven't. We had a bake sale in the village at the weekend and I had loads of cake in the freezer saved up for harvest, and actually most of it went to the bake sale in the village and Mum went and bought some of it back.
You are on the National Farmers Union Crops Board, so you are more aware than most of what's happening around the country. And as we've been reporting on this programme, this harvest isn't the easiest, is it? Absolutely not. It is one of the most unusual harvests I think we have ever had because it is so variable, not just across the country, but, you know, within counties, even within some farms. I think because the weather patterns we've had this year have been so localised and soil type has then played so much into the viability and success of crops that some people are getting almost record-breaking yields on some crops, and then large proportions of people barely have a crop to harvest in places. Everyone's having such a different experience this harvest. Mike Greenwood-Wilkins there on the challenges of this year's harvest. And there is one we haven't mentioned yet. Us. For veg growers in particular, the social diary of the consumer and whether we fancy a barbecue this week or not is another factor to take into account. Mary Ward-Lowry has been to Boston in Lincolnshire to find out the latest on this year's sweetcorn harvest, where she spoke to George Reed from the family-owned Staples Vegetables.
If you're thinking of lighting up the grill this weekend to char some corn on the cob, it might just have come from this field of rustling sweetcorn.
So yeah, if we take one off the plant, you see the cob's surprisingly big. So see, it's fully formed all the way to the end. It's just a pale yellow, not a golden yellow. It's not too
really dense kernels.
Yeah, it's formed really well.
Staples Vegetables supply many of the main supermarkets, and of the 27,000 acres of land they cultivate across the UK, up to 1,400 acres are devoted to sweetcorn.
It's the first sweetcorn we're harvesting this year, probably 2 foot shorter than we'd normally expect, and that's just because of the really extreme dry conditions that we've had. It has, however, produced a good cob in it. We're very lucky here in Lincolnshire. We've got some very fertile silts that are naturally very moisture retentive. Even in this dry year, it's still a good quality crop.
It looks quite a heavy cob.
Yeah, the cobs are surprisingly big, even though the plant is quite short, which I was a bit concerned earlier in the year that it wasn't going to produce a big enough cob to meet our retailer specs, but it has. I would say the only thing is it's probably a little bit more uneven germination, so there'll be a bit more wastage, but that will go into our AD plant. Sweetcorn is great food for AD because there's lots of energy in cobs, and so it's an ideal energy crop for us. So it's not all waste, it'll go to some use and it'll power the business with our green energy.
I know that not many farmers have their own anaerobic digester, but anyone who's growing vegetables for supermarkets has to make sure that their produce is ready for when customers want to buy it.
Biggest demand obviously is early August normally. All the schools are breaking up from holidays. A lot of the retailers put on promotions on sweetcorn to really push the UK crop. First 3 weeks in August is when the 30 or 40% of the UK crop gets moved.
Tell me about the harvesting as well. How does that work? And because you were thinking earlier, just a couple of weeks ago, you were wondering whether it would have to be harvested by hand.
Yeah, we're concerned that the crop was going to be a bit shorter than normal. The early varieties always tend to be a little bit shorter. If the crop was too short, we have mechanical harvesters, but the crop needs to be a certain height for the machines to get under the cob so it can harvest the cob without damaging it. Fortunately, yeah, we're okay. You can see the machine behind us, and yeah, we're just managing to get under the cob to harvest it mechanically. Otherwise, it would have been going back to the first days when we started growing sweetcorn. It was all harvested by hand, which is obviously very slow, very expensive, and finding labour to do that kind of manual work is difficult now. So
this is a harvester coming along now.
The dry conditions, it making it a bit dusty. So
in our faces.
Yeah, but now that's blowing all the trash out, so leaving all the trash in the field. The rest of the plant just gets pulled through the plant and we'll chop that back into the field and it'll be good organic matter and nutrient for the next crop.
And the whole process starts all over again. George Reed there. Well, if you're harvesting this weekend or simply eating, have a good one. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.